because I'm sure it's all wrong. I'm working with a software that's better for me. Let's see here. Okay, I am all set up on Twitch. I'm just going to go to YouTube, make sure I'm all good there. I might be in some kind of unnamed thing. Let's see. See what it says. Okay. I'm just setting up in YouTube here. No, it's not made for kids. Let's see if this is working. All right, I think I'm good there. I'm going to go ahead and get started. So hopefully that music comes through. I really want to know if it does. Oh, I'm still reading offline in Twitch? Shouldn't be. There we go. I'm up and going. I'm just going to see if the music's playing. Could very well not be. Well, no, you don't get my music. That's fair. This software is a little different. Oh, there we go. Everyone can see. Okay, there we go. Okay, I think we're good. We're just gonna set this on repeat. Okay, so today I'm just gonna go through. Actually, I need to send out a notice to people so they know to join me. A little more disorganized than normal. That's okay. It's part of it sometimes. Okay. I'm just gonna send out the notice. I'll put both in here, so their choice. I'm gonna have to do it this way. for hanging out. I won't be long. All right. Okay, and that has been set out. I'm going to go ahead and quickly add the little Legends Talk Live bit here. I sound really quiet. I know I'm talking soft, but let me just make sure it shouldn't be that quiet. Okay. I think I'm good. And see if modify is not letting me. That's too bad. Oh, finally. All right. There we go. And gotta find the right placement for it. I guess it's not gonna stand on top, is it? Okay, that's right. Whatever. We don't really need it. Welcome to Legends Talk Live. Tonight we're just sitting down. We're gonna do these lore dumps when I don't have a specific guest to talk to. This is something where I need to know. I enjoy knowing a lot about lore in various things. I like doing these little explorations. So this won't be me teaching you everything as much as learning alongside you. The two settings I grabbed, I know quite a bit about the Dark Ages and a bit about the Dreamlands. But we're gonna go ahead and not worry too much about that. We're gonna start with some level setting video for each of the topics. So we'll start with vampire, and I'm gonna play a video that's kind of like a recap. It might be AI voiced. I don't really care. It's short and it's not from 2015. So that was my key metrics for this one. Welcome in anyone who's in here. Good to see you. Let's go ahead and dive in. So some portions of this video won't really talk about the origin of vampires, and it might make the assumption that you already know Vampire the Masquerade. So I'll give a few basics if you're new to vampire entirely. The mythical origin of the vampires, according to the Book of Nod, which is like this heretical modern book that everyone tries to, bury and pretend it doesn't exist, is that Cain, like from the Bible, like Cain and Abel, is the first vampire. That was his curse for killing Abel. And he wandered through the land of Nod, which is why it's called the Book of Nod. He ends up creating children of his own, or spawn of his own. Childers is what they refer to them in this game. And they become known as the second generation. They kind of rule openly in what was known as the first city. And then there's a second city. Somewhere in there is the deluge, which is like the flood, the biblical flood. In the second city, the keynotes are that the third generation, so the grandchilder of Cain, rise up and kill the second generation, and as a result, they are cursed. In modern vampire, that's become, especially through the iterations, like in the 90s, they used to be like, oh yeah, this is very much like people don't believe it, but we as the players kind of know it exists, right? And we've moved away from that to be like that could be one of many myths. Like a lot of the 20th anniversary writings and stuff have moved away from the assumption that Cain is actually what happened. Um, but there is still this idea that the antediluvians, that the third generations, those before the flood, are very old and very real and very powerful. And kind of the whole point of Vampire the Masquerade is in modern day, there's going to be Gehenna, which is like the end of times or like apocalypse, and that will involve the return um, of the antediluvian, the return of the third generation, to an awakened state where they are ultra powerful and kind of ruin the world, and depending on what story you hear. Um, the keynote going into this, from each of the third generations, there came about sort of bloodlines, which we know for the most part are clans. These are um, sort of powers and behaviors and curses, because Cain did curse the third generation for killing the second. Um, so there's like a genetic makeup, let's say, for vampires, where they tend to be recruited the same. They might have certain curses and traits that are the same. They have certain powers that are the same if they're from these clans. And one of the big markers for the modern game is that there are uh, sort of the blood is thinning, and when we get to the point where it's truly thinned, where it cannot go any further, like we're at our generational limit, that's one of the key signs that the end is near, sort of thing. So that's a high level summary. Now we're gonna do like a 10-minute dive into Vampire the Dark Ages. One last note is in Modern Knights, there's one sort of major faction called the Camarilla, or I guess in the most recent edition, because the game started in 1990s, as it moved to 2025, there's actually kind of two major factions: the Anarch and the Camarilla, or Camarilla, depending on when you started playing the game. And the these groups don't necessarily buy into, or at least pay attention to, this whole end of times myth like directly. They tend to sweep it under the rug. Um, and they don't necessarily acknowledge that the Cain myth, it's very much a myth. I think tying into the Dark Ages being very much like religion is real, because it's what the Dark Ages were like, really. And they're very tied to religion. They openly use the term Cainite rather than kindred, which is a later term they use to refer to themselves as vampires. And unlike the modern world, where everyone is hidden away through um, these understandings that we absolutely can't afford to make mistakes where the humans recognize what we are. The Vampire of the Dark Age is sort of a period where, yeah, they're not supposed to do that, but they're also kind of experimenting with it. And in the age after the Dark Ages, they the experiments go a little too far, and the time's up with the human Inquisition, like the Church Inquisition, and yeah, it's a bad time for vampires. So let's learn a little bit more about that, and then we'll get into some clan lore stuff. Oh, Okay, I'm going to pause it there. I just realized that it's not really given the audio. So just want to see what I can do here. If anything. Looks like an upgrade. I'll also share system audio. Okay, there we go. Let's try this again. You were just reading otherwise.
One of the most haunting eras in Vampire the Masquerade lore, the Long Night. This isn't just a catchy phrase. It's the name the Kindred gave to the dark centuries that stretched from the fall of the Western Roman Empire
I'll
in the
also
5th
share
century
system
all the
audio.
way to
Okay,
the
there we
sack of
go.
Constantinople
Let's
during the
try this
Fourth
again.
Crusade in 1204.
You were just reading otherwise.
If you're new to the world of darkness, don't. One of the most haunting eras in Vampire. I'll guide you through these shadowed years when Europe was a patchwork of feudal fiefdoms and vampires ruled openly in the dark. Our story begins as Rome collapses. Imperial roads crumble. Trade wanes and the ancient order that once bound Europe together vanishes. Human communities grow smaller and more isolated. Where mortals see chaos and fear, many vampires see opportunity. They no longer have to hide behind masks of civility. There's no grand masquerade yet. They become lords of lonely villages, warlords of fallen provinces, or hermits, wandering a world lit only by torches and faith. One source describes this time in vivid.
Yeah, so that's a really good point too. Is a lot of Vampire the Masquerade is very much like city based. One of the key differences in Dark Ages, not that you can't choose Constantinople or Rome or you know, um, there's a few select hubs that might house dozens of vampires. But the games have always been very specific about vampires not, having having very good numbers, I guess, to their human population, which is kind of their food, right? So they don't want their food to be aware they exist in a lot of cases, or if they do, they often try to present themselves as like gods. Um, so these small towns, might be ruled by one where that person's just blending in as some major figure in the town, and it's more in the way of almost like a Count Dracula sort of thing, than it is about um, in the modern night where you're really just trying to pretend you're a normal human. Anyways, it's different. We don't have clusters and clusters of vampires.
Terms. Saracens and Crusaders clash in the Holy Land, the Reconquista sweeps across Iberia, and blasphemers burn at the stake while monsters haunt the night. It declares that you, as a vampire in this age, are a lord of this world. The long night is thine. As the Western Empire decays, so do many of the great vampiric courts. Cults like the Sons of Mithras sink underground for safety. The old Roman structures that once gave vampires easy feeding grounds disappear, leaving the damned to fashion new social rules. Rather than clinging to humanity, vampires follow roads. Philosophical codes like the Road of Heaven, the Road of Kings, or the Road of the Beast. These paths teach them.
I'm going to check something. I get what he's saying, but isn't there a road of humanity? Yeah, there is. Okay. So probably a better way to word that would have been, rather than being, in modern Vampire, the game is very much based around humanity, and that's really good. Like, it's a powerful thing. But there's also these other roads in Vampire the Dark Ages. There were paths in Vampire the Masquerade, but they tended to be for the more monstrous of vampires, where the roads are, I mean, I guess they're similar, but they seem to be a little more flexible. Like the Road of Heaven is that it's not necessarily as monstrous as some of the other ones, right? Um, but yeah, anyways, that's an aside.
How to control their predatory urges when there is no mortal authority to stop them. Not every vampire is content to rule the ruins. Far to the east on the Bosporus, a trio of ancient vampires conceive an ambitious project. The Methuselah Bester embraces Christianity, takes the name Michael, and, along with his allies Antonius and the Draken, leaves the decaying city of Rome. Together they establish themselves in Constantinople, then still known as Byzantium, and forge what becomes known as the Dream. Michael takes on the role of the son, Antonius becomes the father, and the Draken is the Holy Ghost of their trinity. Their goal is nothing less than a Cainite utopia, a city where vampires guide humanity toward enlightenment rather than simply preying upon it. For nearly 1,000 years, the dream endures. Constantine the Great inspires the triumvirate to make Constantinople not just a haven, but a masterpiece of architecture, art, and culture. Vampires and mortals alike flock to the city to participate in this grand experiment. At times, the dream is harmonious. At others, jealousy and ambition simmer beneath its gilded surface. Antonius grows resentful of Michael's closeness to the Draken. Eventually, his own descendants rise up and destroy him.
Most of the games are set after close to the First Crusade to the Fourth Crusade. There are some reasons why, or maybe not reasons. There's some reasons why you as a new player may want to or not want to do that as a new storyteller. You might decide, I know Vampire well. If you go with 1100 forward, most of the makeup of the modern vampire is kind of present in some form. If you go pre that, you're missing certain clans, even like there's some big shifts. But anyways, let's continue.
The Draken, disillusioned by the betrayal, withdraws into mysticism, leaving Michael alone to shepherd the dream. Meanwhile, powerful outsiders like the secretive Inconnu and the Venetian elder Narses plot from the shadows, seeking to bring the city and its Methuselah patrons low. Beyond Constantinople, most of Europe remains locked in superstition and darkness. Vampires rule rural domains as petty nobles. They are knights who ride through forest by moonlight, high priests who demand tribute from fearful villagers or ancient monsters who slumber beneath castles. Mortal religion is all-pervasive, and the church's growing power keeps many Cainites wary. Yet there is no organized campaign against them, not yet. In these centuries, crusaders march under the sign of the cross and the crescent, but the holy wars are mostly directed against rival faiths, not against vampires. Within the dream, life is different. Kindred there encourage art, philosophy, and theology. Constantinople becomes a beacon for vampires who want to believe they can transcend their beast. But the dream is also fragile. Every decade, it seems some new rivalry threatens to tear it apart. Still, it persists, a jewel of the long night, and a reminder that vampires are capable of more than mindless predation. The long night reaches its climax at the turn of the 13th century. Europe's nobles gather for a fourth crusade, ostensibly aimed at reclaiming Jerusalem. Instead, through a complex web of politics, debt, and manipulation by mortal and Cainite actors, the crusading armies sail against Constantinople itself. In Vampire Chronicles, this diversion is called the Bitter Crusade. It doesn't just shatter an empire, yet it destroys the dream.
I've heard that term.
As the Crusaders storm the walls, Narses...
So I know a lot of the lore around Constantinople because I played a modern game where my players wanted to be as old as Rome. And so I had a scenario where they went into torpor, or like a duo of them. And it made more sense for them to be as new as possible. So we went with East Rome, Byzantine Empire.
And other conspirators undermine the city from within. Mary the Black, once one of the dream's staunchest defenders, performs the ultimate betrayal. She diablerizes Michael, consuming his soul and putting an end to his utopian vision. The triumvirate is gone. The Crusaders sack Constantinople, establish a short-lived Latin empire, and scatter the kindred of the city to the winds. The fall of Constantinople marks the end of the long night. Without the dream to inspire them, and with the mortal world changing rapidly, the vampires of Europe enter a new, more dangerous age. In the aftermath of the Bitter Crusade, vampires turn on one another in conflicts known collectively as the War of Princes. with the dream destroyed.
Yeah, so this War of Princes, it coincides pretty close to, or leads into, uh, quite directly, the mortal Inquisition. It's sort of like some of their actions draw the attention of a very organizing church, and it goes poorly.
And no single beacon to rally around, elders war for territory and influence. These clashes coincide with the rise of the Inquisition. During the Albigensian Crusade in southern France, church soldiers stumble across evidence that vampires are real and deeply embedded in society. The church quietly begins to organize. Within decades, the First Inquisition erupts. Witch hunters scour Europe, burning supernaturals alongside innocents. Cainites who once ruled openly must suddenly learn to hide or perish. The relative freedom of the long night is over. Some vampires respond by banding together and establishing new codes of secrecy, eventually giving rise to the Camarilla and the Masquerade.
And so I'm just going to back up on that because I was fixing something. So
Hide or
yeah.
perish.
So the Inquisition
The
comes,
relative freedom of the long night is over. Some vampires respond by banding together and establishing new codes of secrecy, eventually giving rise to the Camarilla and the Masquerade.
Sure. I
Others
mean, that's a
cling to
huge
older
jump, but
ways or embrace rebellion, laying the groundwork for sects like the Sabbat. The Wars of Princes, the Anarch Revolt, and the Convention of Thorns all flow from the shock that followed the end of the Long Night. Although 8 centuries have passed since the Long Night, its legacy lingers. Elders recall those centuries as a golden age when vampires could be lords and dreamers instead of criminals and conspirators. Relics from Constantinople, like the tomb of the patriarch beneath the Hagia Sophia, remain sites of pilgrimage and conflict for modern kindred.
yeah. So that kind of, it's almost like it's weird because the Dark Ages. It How do I put it? It's not necessarily seen as the Dark Ages for humans was like a dark period for humans. It was filled with death and lack of civilization and culture. Um, it sounds like, in contrast, I mean, this is one way to take it. I guess you could take it in the opposite direction, but these vampire lords were powerful. They didn't have this really obvious hierarchy to um, step on their head or their neck. They didn't have a local one necessarily. And they certainly didn't have clan structure enough to like know what was going on worldwide. So they got to be masters of their own little petty domains. And then like the fall of Constantinople is the end of that time, and it gets way worse with the Inquisition. And it seems like they don't really. I mean, I know the Victorian Age vampire is a thing. There's not much in the role playing in the Renaissance, but I just find it fascinating. Yeah.
Promising secrets and power to those who can access them. Some kindred believe that by studying these relics, they can
I guess if they're
recapture a fragment of the
monsters
dream.
and age
Others see the
dark for
long
humans
night as
would
a
make
cautionary
sense.
tale.
It's actually
Without humility and vigilance, even the most enlightened utopia can be devoured by the beast. The long night is more than a historical period. It's a mirror reflecting both the heights of Cainite ambition and the depths of their folly. From the ruins of Rome to the glory of Constantinople and then to the flames of the bitter crusade, the story of the Long Night shows how vampires have shaped and been shaped by human history. If you enjoyed this journey through vampire history, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel for more World of Darkness lore, and share your thoughts in the comments.
well,
Thanks
like
for
this
watching.
guy, Dyson Mythos, even though I'm pretty sure it's an AI. It was definitely AI art, and I'm assuming AI voice, but it was still a well done video. So, stop. I said stop. There we go. Okay, so we will dive in a little bit more. I mean, that video covered a lot of what you need to know about World of Darkness. Um, let's let's take a look at the clan. So the way this game works is you pick a clan. Uh, Probably the best thing to do is just think about like what your character was as a mortal first. There's a nice lexicon here for terminology that you can get after quite a few games of it. It'll become like very commonplace to you, and it's fun to use it in game once you get it. But yeah, like I said, Canite is what they call vampires. Um, and Caitiff are the vampire with no clan, and the ones they fear, you know, are clanless. That's not one of the part of the 13 generations, and thus risking becoming thin blood. There's a fear of them. Kine is what they call mortals. So from there, the clans. So the Assamite, if you're familiar with V5, they're the Banu Hakim. Um, I think they're quite clear even in this setting, predominantly in the Middle East. They reference it is a derogatory term from the West, even in setting. So they do wear that. I don't know if it was originally written that way or if they just wrote it that way and then they had to explain it later, but it's well covered at the very least. And they are kind of known as the clan of, well, we can look at what their stereotypes are. So these breakdowns are really easy to figure out which one you want. You can go into what their weakness is. Their disciplines are like powers, so you have to look them up, but that's like sort of like heightened senses and or perceiving and stuff like that. Being able to just influence people with your hyper supernatural charisma, and then Quietus is like their really effective assassination tool set. Um, they do mention that they're the children of Hakim here as one of their nicknames, or Saracens because of the linkage to the Middle East, I suppose, at that era. Um, the Bruja, or Bruja, as they're commonly called in the modern term, they were previously the philosopher kings. They're kind of becoming the rabble. In modern night, they are very much the rabble. They kind of, in the most recent edition, 2025 era, they've refound their place by becoming at the forefront of the anarchs. But for a long time, they're sort of these fodder, you know, rebels, problems, but also very strong, so they keep them around. It's better, better to have your enemies close by than preying on you from afar. Once upon a time, in they represent kind of the leading faction of Carthage during the Punic Wars. So their failure there is sort of like the tragic end of their height. They were once a high clan. In some places in the world, they're still considered a high clan. We'll talk about high clans, and um, actually, we'll do that now. Clans are separated into high and low. So high clans are ones that are looked at with like um, some representation of nobility, and then it's like opposite for the low clans. So depending on where they are, like the Banu Hakim in the Middle East would be considered a high clan. Probably in the West, they would be considered much less so, because they're an enemy. Um, the Bruja, or Bruja, as I prefer to say, are located, all over the place. They're probably mostly not considered a high clan by this point because they're sort of falling. Um, but it is interesting to note that they would probably still retain some history of that. It's almost like a nobility that's faced a major scandal or fought on the wrong side of a war, is a way to think of that. The Cappadocians, or Cappadocians, they are like the vampires of death, necromancers sort of thing. They actually have necromancy, and their nickname is. Where's their nickname? Why am I missing that? What was it called up here? Maybe I'm just. Nickname. I'm probably just missing it. Weird. Okay, well, it doesn't matter. Um, what is interesting about this clan is there is no modern equivalent. Well, there is. That's a bit of a broad stroke, but playing a Cappadocian in Modern Knights is very. You're going to have a tough time getting a GM to approve that. Um, Less so in the Vampire Fifth Edition with the clan Hekata, where they kind of bring all the necromantic groups back together under one wing, uh, and they're almost like a clan of not necessarily by blood, but clan by mutual defense pact. Um, the Gangrel, they would be considered low in almost all cases. They are very much a bit more of your feral huntsman sort. Um, a lot of them follow, um, more instinctual, like based moralities, and they're looked down upon often by most of the other clans, though they're still seen as useful. So anyone who is useful, they keep around. The La Sombra. Uh, what's fun about this setting, as I mentioned, high and low clans. This is before, if you're used to the modern day, this is before the Anarch Revolt, the original one. This is before this, long before the Sabbat exists or the Camarilla. So the high and low clans means that you can have a Sombra adventure in the same city quite comfortably. Usually, this is a special permission type of clan. If you're playing a base vampire game in fifth edition, they become a little bit more accessible, but it's still like there's like lore reasons they push that really hard. Um, so they're often known as the Magisters, um, and they are a clan of the shadow um, of tenebration. It's called. So they can step into the one shadow and come out another, or wield weird shadow tendrils. The Malkavian are pretty much the same as modern knights in a lot of cases, except for a case could be made that we treat mental health in modern day a lot better than we did back then. um, so that's a fun thing to play on. This is what I played in Crown of Thorns, which is our actual play with the gentleman gamer Matthew Dawkins, who ran a 3-shot for us. We'll be back next year on Ticking Time Bob Gaming. We'll be doing another short campaign. How long? Yet to be determined. Uh, it is worth noting that I think the Malkavian in this era could have been they could have been more unique, because there's this lore thing called like the Great Prank or something like that. Something I always try to land on when I run. Um, I think it's like a hot fix. So, a lot of time when they retconned, they tried to retcon by rewriting rather than just ignoring or overwriting. And sometimes it made it awkward because like the rewrites would paint them into a corner. The Malkavians in the early editions had dementation didn't exist as a power. That's like a power that messes with others' minds and emotions and stuff. Um, Instead, they had dominate, which is the power of like controlling people through like making a command and having them obey what you say. Very Dracula esque. So they gave them Malkavians originally dominate, and then when they brought dementation in, I believe it was um I think they wrote it into Dark Ages first. They might have wrote it into modern, but the way they wrote it is this is a long lost like gift. Oh, that's what it was. In that's right. I'm getting my facts. Like I said, this is a lore journey. I'm not teaching you everything. But in the early editions, you could play a Malkavian. You had dominate if you were in the Sabbat or the Sabbat. Um, you you had demontation rather than dominate. It was sort of seen as a more loose, specialized power, let's say. Um, and the way they kind of wrote, like later edition, they decided to release it to the wild. Like all Malkavian can have demontation. And the way they describe that is this great prank where, like, on the Camarilla side, all the Malkavians that joined the Camarilla lost use of it for hundreds of years, and then all of a sudden got it back in Modern Knights. Um, Sometimes the Malkavians are portrayed really crappily in a way that's not very good, a good view of mental health, and also kind of goes against the grain of what uh, what the game wants to depict as a personal horror. It's widely known so much that it's in the wiki. It's called fish milk, and it's because of this stupid Dark Ages picture with this random Malkavian kissing a fish or whatever, or making kissy face right next to a fish that he's holding. It's like lol, so random is a bad Malkavian in a lot of people's eyes. Um, though I think you got to afford some, like, to a brand new group playing. I mean, they're they're likely to do that. They're coming from games like D&D that don't take themselves too seriously. Vampire notoriously takes itself too seriously, which I like, but a lot of people don't. Nosferatu, they're another clan that's seen as low because they're hideous. There's kind of lore about them coming from this beautiful hunter, and his curse was he became this ugly thing. So as they get turned, they become monsters, and often they'll prey upon people that already look nice. I think that's something a lot of people miss when they make Nosferatu, is they'll build someone because we're actually we min max even when we don't try to sometimes. So it's easier to go, my guy is, oh, he has lots of hidey abilities, you know, so I'm gonna make him more like a rogue. Well, you don't necessarily make a rogue pretty, in a lot of games. Um, so what I'm getting at is they miss one of the more fun parts of playing the Nosferatu. One of the more fun parts is that whole Phantom of the Opera. Like, I used to be handsome, I used to be pretty, and now I'm not. And that struggle can be the way you cope with that can be fun. Hold on one sec. I'm not responding to chat. Well, I played a Bruja guy in Liam's game. It was to try the Philosopher King thing. Yeah, that's cool. And then in Tragedy, yeah, perfect. I mean, I love the Bruja are actually one of my favorites for that. I don't like the Rabble that much. I like the Philosopher Kings, but like the tragic Philosopher Kings is a fun take. The shields in Dark Ages are so much better than the Modern Night logos too. In a lot of cases, some of them aren't great, but they also have, these were redesigned years and years later. So the Ravnos, they're definitely seen as a low clan in most places, which is partially why they don't land in the Camarilla. They also kind of do what they want. They are depicted often kind of tragically stereotyped in the Gypsy Romani kind of thing, and there's a lot of stereotypes applied to them because of that. That the early games didn't offer any sensitivity to. Um, but I still like them. They're fun. Every edition's different with them. V5, they're kind of like a fallen clan, but they still exist just without their weird illusion powers, which is kind of like one of the only reasons people ever want to play. So it's sort of like if you want to play one in the new game, it's like, well, good luck, like I guess if you want to for the story. And the Setites, also known as the followers of Set, or in V5, we know them as the Ministry. The Ministry is a very interesting take, kind of like the Clan Hakata thing. It's like it extends beyond the blood at that point, and a lot of this is a reaction to what V5 is. But we'll cover modern vampire in a totally different section. What you need to know about the followers of Set is they're tied very closely with Egypt and Egypt religion. Set, the god Set. So they see their antediluvian founder, the third gen that founded them, they think is actually a god. They don't necessarily buy into the Cainite bit. They don't think Cain was what spawned them. They treat Set like he was the first. They're very corrupt based, and I think they're one of the harder ones to get right, because their code is harder to follow for most players. And then on top of that, you got the cultural piece. What I thought made the Ministry more interesting is it's kind of the first take where you've got the followers of Set, where they might be embracing just regular dudes in whatever setting you're playing in, and leading them toward like corrupt dudes, like, but they're not necessarily tied to the Egypt background that someone might really struggle to not only understand but to get right. It's easy to be culturally insensitive from an outside perspective. So it's I find them more fun to play in Dark Ages because you're set in Europe, and or in Outremer, or those areas. Often that's where the games are. I'm sure there's lots of games in Egypt. We played one arc in Egypt, right? So they are they're about as playable as they are in modern. Actually, they're never trusted, but you could masquerade as something else in the setting, or you could probably be a diplomat and get away with it without being killed on sight. But too many screw ups is, you've got to watch your back a bit. Toreador, one of the main clans, we all know they are the elves of the setting. In that, if you go to a LARP, like, everyone wants to be pretty. Setites being really strong, Trent. Yeah. They have this unique power, and they've gotten rid of some of that in the modern game, where it's you might have a unique like one dot power, but you don't have like a whole discipline that no one else can have. So Serpentis is pretty powerful, and the modern version is in the modern game they have Protean, which is also like what the Gangrel have. So they become oddly more capable of fighting in the modern game. They become like way more dangerous because the feral claws or whatever are nasty. Yeah, right. Yeah, that is one of the things most people complained about, is like these powers are so strong, and I get them, and the main clans that you're supposed to play are all like weaker, or not weaker, but they're all kind of the same. And yeah, it's interesting. So the Toreador, um, artisans, vanitists, they're tied a lot to Greece and later France. Um, they are something, like I said, like the elves. Like they're in a lot of games, everyone wants to be pretty elves. Everyone wants to be pretty Toreador. And I don't mean that as a slander to people that like Toreador. Um, I think anything that's popular, you're going to get the good and the bad, if that makes sense. Um, there are a lot of people that nail Toreador well, and there's a lot of people that don't, um, or don't do anything original. Like, um, to play a stereotypical Toreador can sometimes feel like you are, um, you're just repeating an archetype, which, Vampire is a good game to not do that in. So, like with the Toreador, people that are strong role players, they might twist and have a really interesting or good human based background, and then or mortal based background, and then when they're turned, they become something else when they're embraced. And Toreador are a high clan pretty much across the world. Well, across um, the Dark Ages setting. Okay, so the Tremere. My first clan I ever played, they're known as the Usurpers. Um, the Trembling ones. I think it's interesting that they didn't give them any reference to being called the Magi or anything of the sort, because that's, I think, commonly known that that's what they are. There is another game called Ars Magica. And in Ars Magica, um, you play mages in um, like a almost like a fantasy version of Europe. And this is made by the same. I can't remember if White Wolf wrote it, but definitely had shared authors early on. And in the House of Hermes, uh, there is the Tremere. So the origin of the Tremere, it's like one of those crossover things. Um, there is a game called Mage: The Ascension, as it just popped up on the left. It's not a shared lore, but there's like close enough in this era. The Tremere are part of the Order of Hermes, and they find their way into the Embrace. So they sort of find their own way in. If you explore that and unpack it, it's really fascinating because in order to do that, the Tremere have to be already powerful. And they are. There are probably humans that have found ways through magic to live for hundreds of years. And those ones that step out and do that, like Tremere himself, become kind of the they become the first of their vampire clan, and that kind of makes sense as to why they were so effective and why they didn't just get squashed. If they're seen as usurpers, they had a different kind of supernatural backing, though they lost all their magic power when they were embraced. They had to relearn it through a completely different method, which is blood sorcery or thaumaturgy in older editions. I think I think in this version it's thaumaturgy. Let me just check. Yes, thaumaturgy. So there is a specific time in which the Tremere really become playable, and that is tied to, in my opinion, the time they're really playable is when Salat is diablerized. And because of certain chronicles that came out, you can actually play around the time these things happened. Uh, was it 1133? Is that what I saw? Yes, 1133. Um, and the Tremere find their way into the initial embrace like less than 100 years before that. So this is kind of um, the marker for me. If you're going to play a Dark Ages game set before this, it changes the world a bit. The children of Salah become more playable, and depending on how far back you go from 1133, the Tremere might not be kindred at all. I think it's like one more 1020 or something. Um, so we'll continue there. The Zimitzi or Zimish or Zimisei, I've heard too. Um, Fiends, uh, they are there's kind of like two versions of them, but like the common main bloodline at this point is not the ones called the Old Clan. They are animalism, auspex, and vicissitude. Um, so they have powers to control. They're kind of based on Dracula a little bit, save for vicissitude. Um, their weakness is like they need their soil, the soil of the land they're from, to be near them, or they suffer weakness. Vicissitudes where they get weird, and kind of in a lot of people's case, like where they get fun. They turn into these like horrible monsters because they can take skin and they can take bone and they can recraft it, so it can not only change the appearance of someone or make them slightly like stronger, or you know really make some kind of monster out of them, but they can take concoctions of body parts and turn them into these animated like flesh golem things called Schlotza, I think, or something like that. And then there's the Ventru. The Ventru are oh, I don't like that depiction. Um, Let me see if I think they got them wrong here. Power mongers, amatones, patricians. Um, that's one take. I think what you need to do with the Ventru in this era is really look at what their antediluvian counterpart is, um, or not antediluvian, anti-tribute, because the anti-tribute Ventru are kind of like this idea of warrior kings, and there's lots of references in the lore that would suggest that that's what the Ventru were once upon a time. So I think the ones that start to become more like this guy are sort of like a almost like a degradation, but they're like the main line. They learn the world's changing away from these strong king type concepts, and so they still want to be where the power is, and if the power is money, they chase money. Then you know, and that leads to them being, in a lot of cases, that modern day stockbroker archetype you get. So that deals with all the main clans, I believe. Now we get into bloodlines, and I'm not going to go through all of these, but there are a couple ones that are useful. Aramane, they're just, you can look them up. They don't really have too much of a presence in modern day, but they are still, I think, a bloodline. The Anda are fun little, like if you want, if you want to set something in like the Khans, like Mongolian Empire, Kublai, or Genghis. This is a really fantastic, almost gangrel type offshoot. The Bali are always useful because in Dark Ages setting where there is a lot around faith, the idea of direct demon worshippers is pretty interesting take. We'll just move past that one. You can go look up some of the. I think these ones are from the Ebony Kingdom, yeah, which was a questionable book. I don't. I think they must have just been a fan favorite or something. Unless you're playing on the African continent, they're probably not playable. Children of Osiris. A lot of people hate them. I think they're fascinating. If you're playing in a game in Egypt, I would include them. Um, trying to make a gray politics thing between them and Fathers of Set. The Dinava are, I believe, there's a lot of suggestion that they're Ventru like offshoot. set in, I presume, India, um, based on the name and the clothing. And what I thought was kind of interesting is they just flat out give them thaumaturgy. The gargoyles, they're fun because they're like if you have a Tremere game, gargoyles are literally like what we'd expect gargoyles to be, but they're also an experimentation. Like they're created from combining parts. They're a Tremere experiment, and they went and collected these nobody vampires in the low clans, runaway. No one's gonna miss this gangrel or that Nosferatu, and that's how they make them. The Giovanni. Yeah, the Giovanni are the modern necromancers. They actually usurp the Cappadocian or Cappadocians in modern knights, and they become. It's questionable. Some of the early editions made them tied. Well, because they're actually from Venice, I believe, but because they're Italian, I think there was a lot of ties with the mob in a lot of people's eyes. That wasn't super duper popular. Just gonna go ahead and charge my head for a minute. Hopefully, I won't get any major sound back. I shouldn't. I'm not playing anything yet. The Giovanni in this setting. Oh, what happened? Let's try again. Okay. Didn't know many of these extra clans. Yeah. So this is a Vampire Dark Ages 20th edition, so they tried to make as much open as they could. Giovanni in this setting, if you're playing in or around Italy, could be interesting. I'm not even sure how playable they are in this setting, but this ties in well to Mark's like Wednesday game. The Impundulu. I don't remember these folks. Witchkin familiars. Southeast Cape. Interesting. Necromancers. If you're doing a game set in Africa, that could be interesting. Kiasid. Okay, did I say 20th edition? Yeah, 20th anniversary. This is Vampire Dark Ages 20th anniversary. So what happened was they kind of closed in the early 2000s. They closed the 1990s World of Darkness, and they brought out a new World of Darkness that was meant to be like kind of like a complete rehash with way less lore. So you could just play and make your own setting. Is much better for sandbox, and they did their best to make the splats, which is what they call like vampire, werewolf, and all of them. They call them splats to make them more like cross playable, but they still have their limits. So you can do a mixed game a little bit easier on that one. It's worth exploring. I think there will be a renaissance of Vampire the Requiem, and specifically that what it was called New World of Darkness, now Chronicles of Darkness, because there's some value in that. Kiasid. Okay, Kiasid are two things. In most modern night games, they're very much a specific bloodline related to the Sombra, dealing with the Fae. In historical times, they are any combination of a vampire that's embraced someone with Fae blood in them, because that shouldn't work. It's sort of like the same thing with, if a vampire embraces a werewolf, it shouldn't happen. Like 1 million times, it shouldn't happen. The werewolf's whatever rejects it, but every once in a while it works, and that's what the Kiasid are for the Fae folk. Normally they die when they're trying to be embraced, but every once in a while it works, and maybe the person embracing them didn't know they were Fae until it was too late, and then the Kiasid are made. So they have this power called Mythicaria, which is interesting. I think because they can. I think in this era, there's less. It could be easier to play one because they would just look like any other old clan. You know. Yeah. Right. Um. So I had one other thought about this. It wasn't a profound one. Oh, in Dark Ages times, because they're not tied to specifically the Sombra, and there's all sorts of superstitions and things people don't really understand or know about. I think they become a little more playable because maybe one's embraced and they don't know what they are yet. They think they're whatever they're whoever embraced them. They might think they're part of that parent clan because I mean they technically are in some ways. The Lamier, they're another one of the necromancing groups. Gorgons and Lilith. I'll be right back. Hey, sorry about that. Hey, welcome in. Is this just someone popping by? Hey, Sparkles Mandy. You guys raid me? Sorry, I stepped away. My son came over. uh, welcome in, friends. I saw you streaming earlier. Hope game was well. Yeah. So Lame, another necromantic group known as the Gargans or Lilin. Um, to weakness. Oh, right. The Lamia are tied to Lilith, which is a dangerous entity within the world of darkness, tied to a lot of the Cain lore. There's the Lianin, and they are tied to like Britain and such. Memory serves. Sounds like it. Yeah, Ogham for sure. Yeah, okay, that's it. So anywhere in the British Isles, Ireland, such. The Nagaraja are yet another necromantic group. They're one of the more nasty ones. Flesh eaters is their nickname. Um, they are monsters in modern nights, and I don't really know if they're super playable, but they exist. So do what you want with them. In Dark Ages, they do say that somewhere in the book of like basically let people play things they want to play, where like um, a lot of games you can't play things because they're all off limits. I still think you should put some limits based on what your setting is, but I understand that the intention is maybe people don't get to play their favorite thing or whatever in these. They create the lore and then no one's allowed to play it. You know, the Niktuku, they're based on the same progenitor as the Nosferatu, but there's this whole lore where the Nosferatu are hunted by the Niktuku and by their progenitor, and so they are like the progenitors, like boogeymen. I think the hungry, and they are nasty in their own right as well. What is their weakness? One of three words from Army of Darkness. Yeah. So they can't get food from. They can't drain the blood of mortals and get any sustenance from it. Ramanaga. So they did add quite a few of the groups that existed in the Ebony Kingdom in this. I think they tried to make in the 20th anniversary. They tried to make the game more world spanning, or at least covering what you would expect to be covered in the Dark Ages. And so I'll talk briefly about the Salibri, because if you're playing a game again before 1133, and especially if you're playing a game before like 1020, you cannot really play a Tremere. This is the clan that gets usurped by them. They are healers, warriors, and watchers, and their kind of key trait is this third eye in the center of their head, which turns out to be a bit like a bullseye when are dwindled to a small number and on the run from the Tremere and later the Camarilla and everything. The Tremere do a really good PR job against them, psyop, and the fun thing you can do with a Salubri is not make them uber, like the worst thing you can do in a game like World of Darkness, where there's a lot of moral relativity and personal horror, is to make a clan that's immune to it. So, even though there's some things that make it feel like they're holier than thou, giving them human weaknesses and playing on those, I mean, that's what the personal horror side of the game is about, anyways. So, yeah. Do a quick shout out to. Thanks for coming by, Mandy. They are one of my favorite clans. There's something I played long term twice, and I got to play a warrior one time, and I got to play a healer another time. I do enjoy them. If you're gonna set a game pre, um, like pre the Tremere, especially pre their progenitor getting diablerized, you can kind of make them different than they're presented in any other setting, which is they're like just a dwindling number high clan. You know, they're a high clan because their progenitor was widely praised, but they themselves are sort of seen as one dimensional or two dimensional, like very linear and problematic at times to a lot of the kindred that want to, or Canaanites that want to do whatever they want, and the Celebrities sometimes muck that up. It'd be like the Starks in King's Landing a little bit, but doesn't mean that you can't make a Stark with some flaws, if that makes sense. Um, yeah, that's what I'll say. You can also lean into there's lots of like suggestion that maybe they're not as squeaky clean, and neither is their progenitor. And if you can lean into that, people do like to lean into that. I think it's fun. Um, I think we're close to done with. Oh, there's the true Brujar, true Bruja. I love their idea. I love the idea of like not being clear what the lineage was in certain things, and I even like the story about the original Bruja and like Troily or Troil. It's an interesting story, um, but the fact that they have like time bending powers, kind of dumb. Where the Bruja or Bujar are full of emotion, they are kind of absent to it, and their nickname is scholars or sages. And that pretty much covers it. From there, we talked about the high and the low clans. From there, the other key role playing aspect is you get into the roads, and these kind of tell you how you should behave. So you get a score on a road, and you get to um, seems OP the temporis. Yeah, it is a little bit, and when it's not, it's like why have a time bending power if you can't do time bending stuff? It's just kind of a weird idea, but I think they try to make it fit because there are fans of it. Um, so I'll go to humanity because it's the easiest one to explain. It's very similar then to the other vampire games if you've played those. So trying to keep a score of humanity 10, you have to actually avoid selfish thoughts, not even actions, right? Um, Violation of another at 6 can get you lower. And of course, like any game, should you fall to 0, you give way permanently to your beast, and your beast takes over, and you become an unplayable monster who doesn't really even have sentience anymore, other than like maybe sentience is wrong. You don't have the part of you that was you is gone. You are just a beast. There is you not even verbal, I think, in most depictions of it. A lot of 80s and 90s games, that was like the role player else mechanic, play Cyberpunk and it was Edge, not Edge. Was it Humanity? I know Shadowrun and Cyberpunk had similar themes of losing your humanity and then becoming a cyber psycho. I think it was in Cyberpunk, and something equivalent in Shadowrun. I don't know. Shadowrun, I think, was like empathy. Maybe it was Cyberpunk that was empathy. I don't know. My point is that this was a common mechanic in a lot of games. It kind of snuck its way back in the recent Pendragon game too, because they moved honor out. Now honor can actually drive you into a point where you become unplayable if it gets low enough. Um, it was a common '90s game mini mechanic or mini trend. Never my favorite because it doesn't leave room for some nuance or temporariness, and it assumes that the player's doing that and the dice aren't doing that for the player. So it's sort of like extra punishing the player for bad dice rolls um, by making their character unplayable at some point. Just sounds kind of like sometimes it's you, sometimes it's not you as a player. I just like systems that are a little more graceful in how they handle that. So that's rogues. And then if you've never played these games before, you're rolling a pool of d10s. And in this edition, and a lot of editions like it, there's a base target number, which is 6. And you're trying to roll as many successes, as many dice over that number. Ones take away from your pool. I usually throw that roll out entirely because it's just oddly punishing at times. So I try to throw the ones rule out, but then there's things like specializations, which I think in this edition, it, maybe it's this edition V20 normal modern knights for sure. It's like specialization means if you roll a 10, you get 2 successes, not 1. So um, you have basically physical, social, and mental attributes, and then um, you have abilities, which are like your skills. Um, hey, welcome in. Oh, welcome in. K-Night Chronicles. So one of the things I think is super fun in these games, if you really kind of do it right, is there's this nature and demeanor, which are called archetypes. If you get these archetypes right and you don't think of them strictly as like um, my nature is something that I actually am, and my demeanor is something that I'm actually not, but I'm present that way. The Don't think of it as always as like your character being in on it. You know, you might be um I'm gonna struggle to come up with one immediately, right? um you might be a dabbler as your nature, and the way it comes off to others is like a child. And so when you behave in those ways, there's mechanics that give you back willpower, which is kind of the meta currency to do above and beyond things in this game, and some powers even require it. So you build your character. There's that fun part of backgrounds if you're familiar with other vampire games. Uh, let's see, there was one vampire group that was a little different. I think these all look the same. Context, domain. So it's domain rather than haven, which is fun, right? Because you might actually have land in this game, since we talked about how Dark Ages is a lot of small, places with small populations. You might be the lord of your own little petty domain, rather than these giant mega sprawl cities that the modern games try to depict. Influence, yeah, these are identical to modern knights. um, Retainers, underlings. Uh, in one of the editions for Dark Ages, I think they had like the ability to have soldiers, and I thought that was fun because it was better depicting of, like, when I think retainer, I think one ghoul or like a little gang, because that's what you have in modern knights. But it was fun to think of in Dark Ages, if you're this lord sharing a small fiefdom, or maybe you're not even sharing it, right? it's sort of this, it's an opportunity to do something entirely different. I think that's cool. Um, I think with that, anything else? No, otherwise it's pretty much the bog standard old World of Darkness structure. But there's a lot of cool reasons I went through on why this game can be different. Specifically, the high clan and low clan structure means that there's way more gray in the political structure than kind of the black and white of Camarilla, and Sabbat Sabbat. I'll say them both. For me, it's Camarilla and Sabbat. That's what I say. But I know a linguist that swears by Sabbat, so whatever. Um, all right. That is Vampire the Dark Ages. The reason why I did that is I have an upcoming game called Days of Darkness. I recently did a 3-part actual play under the gentleman gamer Matthew Dawkins, where Jack from Lore by Night, myself, Zach, who plays on our channel a lot, and Ree from Mortal Rolls or Sorcery Arts is the other name that Ree goes by. We sat down and played a 3-part called Crown of Thorns, Set in Thorns. I had a huge wave of people come into our Ticking Time Bob Chronicle channel as a result of that, and I realized, oh no, I don't have a lot of actual plays in Vampire. So I'm spinning up a bridge while we figure out what 2026 looks like, because we'll probably be doing a Crown of Thorns part 2, and very likely be doing something with Lore by Night in the Wraith setting, which is maybe something I didn't describe. The World of Darkness is a setting that has more than one game in it, all around those like classical horror themes. So Wraith is ghosts, and werewolves is werewolves, and vampire is vampire. Hunter is those who fight back against those things. And so you're mortals with some slight powers, sometimes more than slight powers. And then Mage, which is, I don't know where Mage fits, honestly. Like if you think about that narrative of those others, maybe I'm just a Mage hater. There's some cool ideas in Mage. I'm not as big on the neo pagan side. I would have much rather seen like a modern Ars Magica if we are gonna do that. Like take Ars Magica as it was written and find a dark path for it to go forward. But nevertheless, it's a popular game and it has a huge fan base, or a loyal fan base, we'll say. Not huge. Those who are into Mage love it, and it's like their favorite, and they play a lot of it. I'm gonna quickly. Let's do a shout out to K-Night Chronicles. Let me give them a follow. See what they're up to. Love the name. Mage scares you. Yeah, that's fair. I, you know, I don't know. It's something I would love to play with a group of really strong will players. I think I'd almost want a table thing where we weren't going to power game, because the game's already very power gamey. So it's like, let's make a rule where everything we're doing is drama first. I could probably tolerate that game. Otherwise, it's a game where you can, part of like what everyone else likes about it is you can invent your way creatively out of every problem with magic. Cool. That's not really why I play World of Darkness or role playing games to begin with. So it's just not my style. Doesn't mean it's wrong. Okay. With that, Vampire's done. Let us switch over to the next setting, which is the Dreamlands. So I've got a couple of videos here I want to kind of tap into. Um, but you'll just have to give me a sec while I look them up. I'll show the movie representation first. And this movie, I think, just finished shooting. It's been like an indie project of someone for a long time. I'll show the old trailer and then I'll show the new one. This is from 6 years ago. I love this. I'm excited that they finally finished shooting this. All right, and then I will go to the newer trailer, which I think is quite a bit different. It's like an indie movie, so you're gonna have to give it some grace but it still looks pretty fantastic. It was all like fan not kickstarted, but crowdfunded. A lot of these are things that reference right back to the actual books, which we'll talk about in a minute after this trailer. Stories, rather. I mean, it is still H.P. Lovecraft. We'll talk about that in a second. All right, so oh, stop. Okay, so just talking about that a little bit here. Um, the dream cycle, as it's often called, is a series of stories told in this setting or around this setting or the ideas of the setting called the Dreamlands, and it's kind of this other world that exists in our dreams that as children we're able to access, but we lose later on in life. It was not written with the express idea of being related to um, Call of Cthulhu or the mythos, but it has a very, very, very strong link because it is very much in the same universe. Randolph Carter is a character that goes across the stories. Now, I always say this wrong. Nyarlathotep. I think I got it right there. I always say Nyarlathotep um, is a um, outer god, a herald of the outer gods, or whatever. He is a villainous entity that exists in both settings. Um, so, but the emphasis on the Dreamlands is more on like if it were modern, I'd say it would be more about like dark fantasy than the mythos. It's got that whole isekai um, Lion Witch in the Wardrobe vibe to it, where you're stepping into another dimension. You can get there two ways. You can get there through sleep, which is very hard to access when you're an adult unless you're in some kind of deep sleep, like a opioid coma. um, or you can access it through certain gateways. Like I think that's what they were doing in that um, trailer. But if you die there, then there's no returning. Like if you die in your sleep, you return usually back to yourself, and you just never can access the dreamlands again through your dreams. But if you die by crossing over there, you're dead. Like, um, so, anyways, let's look at this video, one last one, and then we'll poke around the setting a little bit more. We'll pause as we go through it. Got asked, isn't Nyarla? No, Nyar Lathotep is not the King in Yellow. The King in Yellow is Haster um, from Carcosa. I believe, if I remember, Nyarla. You know what? There's another video. We'll look at that one too. But I believe he is like the herald to Azathoth, which is this like there's the whole idea that if Cthulhu or the Great Old Ones awaken, probably the Earth's gonna like be destroyed. But if Azathoth awakens, it's like reality is destroyed. Um, in the old Arkham Horror Second Edition, if that you have to pick at random what your Great Old One is, and there's certain effects on the board as a result of it. If you got Azathoth and he awakens, game over. You don't get that last sequence of the game where you get to like fight the Great Old One. All right, let's. Not my sponsor. Let's see. Probably close enough. Looks like a cool board game. Check it out sometime. Sorry. Hmm. I really like that idea too. I think that's such a cool thematic thing. It says, can't see it, but it says Serenian Sea. I like the idea of the cats in Ulthar. It's got a very, again, there's almost like this historical, like, it's, you can tell there's no influence by Tolkien, like it's a different take. I can't remember what the influence was. There was something before the Dreamlands that was kind of like the Dreamland. The Dreamlands. I forget what it was called. It's another set of stories. Lord Dunsany. Oh man. There we go. Mm. Bachweg. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so there's a lot of fun stuff to work with in this setting. Um, it's one of the earliest things that was released with Call of Cthulhu too. Even though there are lots of different things done in the Dreamlands across all the editions. I think sixth edition was the most recent version they have, and I think we're on seven now. So, um, but there's a conversion guide for how to upgrade six to seven. It's got a Narnia meets Lovecraft vibe. Right? Oh, well, that's not ideal. I know we're almost done, but we'll just quickly stop sharing, share, and
unwary dreamers, and the ongoing conflict between the forces of order and chaos affects
that should
everyone
work.
in the Dreamlands. Preparing for the journey. If watching this video about the Dreamlands has
Seeing.
inspired you to attempt the journey yourself, you should prepare carefully. Success isn't guaranteed, and the experience can be overwhelming for the unprepared. Practice lucid dreaming techniques. The ability to maintain consciousness and control within dreams is crucial for navigating the Dreamlands safely. Prepare mentally for the strangeness you'll encounter. The Dreamlands operates by dream logic rather than physical laws. Things that seem impossible in our world are commonplace there. Consider your motivations carefully. Remember that the Dreamlands is not a paradise. It's a complete world with all the complexity that implies. There are wonders beyond imagination, but also horrors that could destroy you. The journey to the Dreamlands isn't for everyone. It requires courage, wisdom, and a willingness to accept that you might never be quite the same afterward. But for those who are called to this strange realm, it offers possibilities that exist nowhere else. You could explore cities carved from single gems. You could sail between the stars on ships made of crystallized music. You could speak with gods and bargain with beings older than human civilization. You could build something entirely new or discover secrets that have been hidden for millions of years. The choice is yours. Sweet dreams, traveler. May you find what you seek in the lands beyond sleep. If this video entertained you, then please hit the like button. And yeah, don't forget to show some love to Abyss Echo, the Forbidden Right. If you are interested in Lovecraftian universe, you may check this playlist of mine.
It's a pretty good playlist. I'll just show a little bit of it.
With AI, you can create a realistic
pretty
clone of
quick.
yourself in
It's
just
not
10
2
minutes. You can use this.
Imagine you're working the graveyard shift at the Egyptian wing of the Metropolitan
That's
Museum.
good enough for now. But yeah, Dreamlands is something I want to explore a little bit more. So I want to start diving into the lore. I'm not an expert on this one, so it's going to be a lot more of an effort. I'll probably come back and do a part 2 where I dig into the lore a little bit more. But I do like a lot of it. So um, it's got some cool vibes. It's got mechanics. I think it's the type of game where you've got to set it up. Like if everyone goes in expecting to just not be wowed by it, it's almost like you got to create really mundane Call of Cthulhu characters and then have them experience it, usually through some kind of drama. And I think it could be a brilliant game. But if you just kind of have everyone build a character, it'll just feel like a boring version of D&D or Lion Witch in the Wardrobe or something. So yeah. Anyways, I had a decent showing on Twitch and YouTube, so thanks for following. And I'm gonna go ahead and call it there. I'll be doing these sometimes when I don't have guests on. I haven't locked like um, my next interview, but at some point in December, I'll be bringing in Syrinx from the Darkness Emergent and Vampire, V5 fandom. Uh, She's an influencer in that space. We'll be bringing her in to discuss what Darkness Emergent and modern Vampire LARP is like. Just Vampire LARP in general. But thanks for watching, y'all. We'll talk to you later.